Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Marriage is what brings us together today. Marriage, that blessed arrangement, that dream within a dream.
Welcome, listeners, to episode 91 of the Ad Nauseam podcast. Jeff, what was that?
That was very strange. We've never had anything on the show like that before.
You mean an audio clip that we harvested from the internet, violating copyright?
I believe so. That's the first time we've done that.
Well, we harvested some other things. We had a little bit of a Seinfeld.
Oh, that's right.
Back in the least popular episode.
I can tell just by the tone of your voice, you're still angry about it.
Can you spare a square? It was horror vacui.
Yeah.
Right? The Dipolon vase.
Yeah. Great stuff. Go back
we thought that would be huge.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you never can tell.
Nobody bid on it. So what was it?
It was from The Princess Bride.
Ah, The Princess Bride.
Right. I'm guessing that probably, I would guess most of our listeners would probably recognize
Probably,
that.
yeah. So would you call yourself a bridesmaid? You know, someone who just really loves that movie?
Is that what they call fans of that?
I think they're called bridesmaids.
Okay, if that's the case, then no. It's one of those films that, back in the day, I remember in high school, my friends and I quoting. It's a very quotable movie,
yes.
Right? And I think it's one of those things that even if you haven't seen the film, you've probably heard the phrase, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
Right.
And so it's kind of designed to kind of latch itself into the popular culture.
Right.
I enjoyed it. I remember watching it a few times with my friends.
Yeah, that's Peter Cook, right? Who was talking about marriage at the beginning there.
Right. And I believe he was a British comedian.
Okay.
And kind of made his name on a radio and early British television. It was a huge influence on the Monty Python guys.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Really? So
I believe so.
Are you a bridesmaid or not? What's the...
I am a fan of the film, but I refuse to be called a bridesmaid. Okay, right.
Am I a fan of the film?
But what about you? What about you?
Not a great fan of the film.
What's wrong with you?
I don't know. If too many people like something, I don't like it.
Yeah, I think that's a very common human trait.
Is it?
It reminds me of if you're really into a band that's up and coming,
right?
Not a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah, you're on the in.
You're on the in, but once they break, you're kind of like,
why am I following this anymore?
Exactly.
Everybody likes it.
Right.
Yeah. So I've seen it and I've laughed, but it's kind of like Monty Python. When I was 19 or 20 and watching those in college as an undergrad, I thought, this is the pinnacle of comedy. Nothing can get funnier than this. Mm-hmm. 25, 30 years later, I watch it and I think, really?
You have that. It's been that much of a reversal for you.
Yeah. Some of it's clever. Some of it is just so stupid. And I think, how did I ever think this was so funny? What was wrong with me at the time? And I had a little pity on 20-year-old me.
Yeah, I got you. I think my taste for the absurd.
Okay.
I had much more of a taste for it back when I was younger than I have today. But I showed the film recently to my boys.
Wait. Can I ask?
Yeah, please.
Is it a film or a movie?
This is a movie.
This is a movie because a film has pretensions to literary quality.
Right.
A movie is just like Top Gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I saw recently.
Yeah. Do we need to talk about that?
No.
Okay.
But anyway, you showed this film.
I showed this movie to my boys.
Princess Bride.
Yeah, and they enjoyed it, but they weren't. They weren't. Keeled over laughing or anything. They thought it was a good story. They wanted to find out what happened, what was going to happen. Maybe they're a little bit too young to. I think it's kind of aims for that
late adolescent,
junior high.
I would say around 17, 15 to 17. 17 is maybe a little old, but
I think that. That's kind of the pocket when I remember kind of really enjoying this film. But that clip. I love that clip.
Yeah, and it's very apropos of today's episode because we're talking about marriage.
We are. Thank you for finally tying that in.
So my name is Dr. David C. Noe. I'm here in Vomitorium South, which we like to refer to as the bunker because it's deep underground.
Deep, yeah.
Safe from the attacks of our critics and enemies with my good friend, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. And how are you doing, Jeff?
I'm feeling good. I can't listen to that clip without smiling.
Yes.
It always raises a smile. And but even beyond the clip, I'm feeling good tonight.
Have you gotten any fan mail about your walking program, your exercise program?
Not a scrap.
No, your regimen? Because
Right.
I think you already got a solid 12,000 steps in this morning.
I did. That's kind of my usual daily regimen. I like to get up early,
Right.
walk all over downtown, and come back with a good 10 to 12,000 steps in.
You don't hesitate, you perambulate.
I perambulate. Yes, I do.
That's
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
And how am I feeling?
How are you feeling?
Thanks for asking. I'm doing really well. Yeah, it's been an early morning. I did some Latin tutoring this morning with a friend of mine in Alabama. He's probably not listening. He's too disciplined a chap. But we read some good 16th century Latin together. Some beautiful lines, some quibus gemitibus quam ardentibus votis, something like that, groans and fervent prayers. It was a good time.
That's a good way to start the day.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent.
So what are we talking about today, Jeff?
Well, we're back knee deep in book 4 of the Aeneid, and I think we're at in some ways we're gonna start with a crucial moment.
That's right.
Right.
But this is going to be the penultimate episode of book 4. I think we got one more.
We do.
We have 3 total because we're not even going to deal with the Mors Didonus this time. Right?
No, we're not.
Put it off one more.
Right. So another reason for the audience perhaps to ask, will this series on the Aeneid ever end?
No, but we've gotten some nice feedback recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a woman, we'll give her a proper shout out at some point, but first name is Brigid, the last initial is P, and she's really enjoying this Aeneid series, so that's good news for us.
That's good. No, I was a little hesitant of doing this deep of a dive, but it's been great for me to get back into this text.
Really enjoyed it. And we do have an actual legitimate shout out.
Who does this go out to?
This goes to the wife of, I think this is the first husband and wife team ever to get consecutive shout outs.
That's huge.
Or, not consecutive, but on the same program. And that is Jaap Jacobs.
Jaap Jacobs, his wife.
Jaap.
All
This
right.
is the wife of Jaap. We can't call her Mrs. Jaap because she has her own name. What is that, Jeff?
Her name is Martine van Ittersum.
Martine van Ittersum.
Now, if I remember, are they in Scotland?
They're in Scotland.
That's right.
And I believe it's a friend of Martine's who doesn't like our Scottish accents.
Oh, okay. But don't even go
No,
there.
I won't.
Okay.
All right. So, Martine teaches early modern history at the University of Dundee and specializes, this is the most interesting specialization, she specializes in Dutch overseas expansion in the early modern period. Wow. That is very specific.
It's very specific.
Especially its implications for political thought and practice. And I must say, I am so thankful that there are persons interested in such a broad range of topics and willing to specialize, because this is obviously very, very important. But, who's going to do it? Well, Martine is, right? She's got the interest, the skills, and so she brings a lot of this important information to light. What else do we know about Martine?
She is also a book historian. Her research focuses on the social history of knowledge, including the materiality of texts, the archaeology of archives, and the history of canon formation. She's currently finishing her book on the transmission and use of the papers of Hugo Grotius. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, so Grotius or Grotius, I think is how it's often pronounced, was a Dutch scholar, a remonstrant. So he had started out as a Calvinist, and then he kind of went in a different direction. So I don't have his exact dates, but it's early to mid 17th century. Huge polymath, this guy.
Okay.
I mean, he just was an enormously influential and brilliant scholar, but quite controversial. So child prodigy. I guess here in our script, he is described as the well-known 17th century Dutch jurist who, of course, wrote a lot in Latin. He's a good Latinist. I like his Latin. I'm not a fan of some of his thought. But again, someone's got to know Grotius, and Martine is the one.
So you've come across him because I know you do a lot of translating of Latin from that era.
All the time.
Yep.
He is one of those guys that is quoted in all the biblical commentaries, often disapprovingly, but as someone whose keen insight unearthed a lot of important observations.
Very interesting.
Just a real sharp fellow. We should do an episode on him sometime.
Sounds fascinating. Well, Jaap adds here at the end, says, as Martine obtained her PhD at an American university, she spent a number of years in the U.S., so she gets our jokes better than Jaap does.
I have to say that on the whole, then, I'm more a fan of Martine than of Jaap.
Exactly. Yeah, the needle just moved.
That's correct, toward Martine, because she's getting our jokes.
That's right.
You notice it doesn't say appreciates your jokes much better than I do, but simply gets them.
Yes.
I don't know if this is get like catching a cold or something.
Yeah.
If that's the...
right, exactly.
That's how we're to understand it?
Yeah. But I also wonder if either of them like popcorn.
I don't know, but nice segue.
Thank you.
You may remember that their daughter also got a shout out not too long ago.
That's right. The whole Jacobs.
That's right.
Family.
The family are getting their shout outs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent.
So well done. But popcorn, Jeff.
Let's talk a little popcorn.
Okay. What do you think? Are we popcorn people?
I'm a popcorn person.
Right.
My family are popcorn people. But let's talk a little bit about one of our wonderful sponsors.
Yes.
Pop City Popcorn.
Yes. Where are they located?
They're located in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Yes.
And they are a specialty popcorn shop. And as I've said on this show earlier, I was skeptical about all the fancy flavors and such because I've been burned by the hot Frito chorito chips with all the flavoring
here,
right?
You've been scorched.
I've been scorched
like what's his name, Borville Edenrocker,
exactly,
who's been left in the microwave for not 3.5 minutes, but 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
Yeah,
and then you've got that nasty cloud of smoke that comes billowing out of your microwave, and
it's awful.
Ruins the evening.
It does. You got that problem, and you got all just kind of the fake, cheese dust that they put on all these salty treats.
The Jacker Crack and the Fatty Pop that you can buy in the bag at the store.
No, thank you.
No,
thank you. But this stuff is the real deal.
It is.
So,
what are some of your favorite flavors?
I like the Parmesan. I'm more like the savory.
Yeah.
The bacon. The one
bacon cheddar.
Bacon cheddar is a great one.
Right.
My boys love the caramel, the two-way drizzle.
That's right.
For your sweet tooth.
The Rainbow Pop.
Yep, the Rainbow Pop.
Yeah, there's some great stuff. They have this movie theater package where you get the movie theater buttered popcorn and all the accessories.
Yeah.
It's a good way to spend the evening, maybe be a bridesmaid and watch Princess Bride.
Give it another view.
Yeah, give it another view. Later. So let's say one of our loyal audience members, and let's face it, they're probably all loyal, want to score themselves some popcorn. What should they do,
They should go to popcitypopcorn.com, check out their amazing array of offerings, find the stuff you want, type in the coupon code ANPOP20, ANPOP20, and that'll get you 15% off your... No, it's more?
No. What? The 20 indicates...
Of course.
They get 20% off. It's okay.
Right.
It's early. 20% off their first order.
That's right.
So definitely worth checking out.
Do it. All right, Dave, you've got our opening quote this morning, don't you?
Yes, I do. And this is from Brooks Otis, once again, his work Virgil, A Study in Civilized Poetry, 1964 from Oxford, but then reprinted by the University of Oklahoma Press. This is really nice. You can pick it up as a paperback. It's a dense but really enjoyable read.
This is one of the essential works on
exactly.
the Aeneid.
Yep. And we're also going to look at a little bit of William Anderson, The Art of the Aeneid, later in the episode. Excellent. What I think are the two most important books on this poem from the 20th century.
Fantastic.
So this is from pages 305 and 306. And Otis writes, "The passing of the empathetic and psychological initiative from Aeneas to Dido." So that's in book 2. Right, the passing of the empathetic and psychological initiative from Aeneas to Dido was in itself a sign of something very wrong. And his narrative, so ironically set in the very middle of the love story, so this is the narrative of the fall of Troy in book 2, in the middle of the love story, makes clear what was wrong. The omens at the end of book 2 had marked a change in all Aeneas's ideas and expectations, a change that he could neither understand nor emotionally encompass. The one sure pietas that Aeneas could and did understand and encompass was that toward his father Anchises.
Yes.
So that's solid.
Yep.
I love my dad. I reverence him. He's the tradition, the past. That's locked in. Anchises, on the other hand, had really been converted, had felt and known that his life had been prolonged for one divine purpose. His initiative in Book 3 was thus as necessary to Aeneas as his death was unnerving. Aeneas as yet had neither the experience nor the knowledge to support his new Roman pietas alone. He was still emotionally dependent on his father. But after his father's death, this dependence could mean only weakness and vulnerability. His conscience was now no match for Eros. So the death of Anchises here is interpretation.
Yeah.
The death of Anchises prepared Aeneas to fall in love with Dido. That's Otis's claim.
Okay.
Hence the almost immediate transition from the death of Anchises to the union with Dido in the cave.
Yes.
We only regain empathetic contact with Aeneas when we see him appalled at Mercury's message, which we're going to talk about today.
Right.
Otis continues, bewailing his fate, yet eager to do quickly what do he must. The ensuing tragedy of Dido takes place by itself while Aeneas is off, planning his departure, sleeping on his ship, or sailing the high seas. He does not grasp its meaning either for Dido or for himself.
Right. That's really insightful.
There's a lot of insight there.
So if I can, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Break it down for us.
Well, if I could put this in kind of like almost modern like dating parlance.
Okay.
Dido is Aeneas's rebound relationship from Achates.
Exactly.
He's not ready.
Right.
For it fills a void.
That's right.
For him, but he doesn't understand kind of the weight of everything upon him at that moment.
He has a kind of emotional immaturity.
Yes.
This is the Otis's point. I think you've got that exactly right. The odd part about that is I don't think in contemporary terms, now I don't know anything about dating because I've been married for 26 years.
Yeah.
But, we don't think about a rebound being from any kind of general emotional trauma. It's usually from another romantic relationship.
Exactly. Right.
That's the distinction. It's still very helpful though, because Aeneas is emotionally devastated from the death of his father. That was his secure pietas, as Otis says. Now he needs something else, and so he's easy prey to the passions of Dido.
Right, he falls right into it, and then to extend it, when he leaves, as the kids say, he ghosts her.
Yes,
he doesn't say anything.
Right,
he just packs up and leaves.
He stands there,
and that's what, in many ways, sends her completely over the edge.
Right. I thought it was very insightful that Otis says here, we don't reconnect with Aeneas. We only regain empathetic contact with him when we see him appalled at Mercury's message. So he's passive. He's in the background for the majority of the book, doing almost nothing. And so you think,
as you talked about in the previous episode,
correct?
Right? Yeah.
About whom is this epic? Is this about Aeneas? Well, not for a good portion of book 4.
Right.
It's Dido's story, but Otis's point is it's necessarily Dido's story as part of Aeneas's emotional development.
Right. So we were talking in the previous episode about how I think one of the effects, we can speculate whether Virgil, intended or not, of this book is to kind of focus the sympathy on Dido, because Aeneas kind of just lurks in the background there. But from Otis's point of view, it's also kind of this necessary plot point,
correct,
to push Aeneas towards where he needs to go.
Yes. So there actually is character development. Now we'll talk about this later as we approach the end of the epic, which again, is going to be 2025 or something.
Exactly. Right.
But we're going to look at some of the interpretive aspects, and particularly this question: does Aeneas develop as a character?
Yeah.
And I think the preliminary answer, thanks to Otis, is yes, although not in ways that a modern audience would expect.
Right. I mean, if your benchmark is an Odysseus or an Achilles, or fill in your favorite Greek hero, I think Aeneas is always going to frustrate you. And that too, I think maybe even for Virgil, is by design.
Yes. Because
of this notion of that he's pulled along by fate.
Right.
All right. So we ended the last episode with this bargain, this agreement between Juno and Venus.
Right.
And so Juno wants to Juno wants to keep Aeneas away from Italy.
Correct.
Right? She wants to kind of stave off this fate as long as she can. And so her plan is, well, let's arrange things so that Aeneas and Dido wind up together.
Right.
She uses the language of marriage.
Yes, she's the love boat captain.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Exactly right. That's what we also talked about that. And so she's Gopher. She's Isaac.
Right.
She's Captain Stubing.
Yeah. And Venus.
Yeah.
She wants him to get to Italy and gain his glory, but she's afraid he's going to die in Carthage.
Right.
Because he's weak. So she's willing to make this temporary agreement with Juno simply to protect the life of her son.
Right, exactly. And one of the ironies here, it seems that Venus ultimately understands the machinations of fate better than Juno does.
Right.
Juno kind of has her fingers in her ears, is going, la, 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 I don't want to hear it.
Exactly. And one of the funniest things that you've said, I must say, was that meanwhile Jupiter's sitting on the couch like some, sleepy old uncle.
Yeah.
And he wakes up and says, just figure it out.
Right.
What's the problem here?
Exactly. What do I hire you people for
exactly.
anyway? Right.
Disinterested, distant, right? Where's the remote?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So this is Juno's plan seems to work without a hitch. They're out on What are they hunting in? It's like a...
It's an aristocratic fox.
It's like a fox hunt,
and
deer hunt,
there's a
boar
fox,
hunt.
there's a boar. Throw in your, quadrupedal mammal.
Right.
This is what the rich and famous do.
It is.
And there's a beautiful description. We passed over it because we can't cover everything. There's a beautiful description of Aeneas and his men waiting at the gates of the palace.
Yeah.
And, Venus has poured all kinds of beauty over Aeneas's shoulders and head, and he's standing there godlike, and then Dido, the queen, comes out looking very glamorous.
Yes, yeah.
For her big moment on the hunt, and she's gorgeous, and it's a magical moment. I'll just say that
it is. Do you know Oscar Wilde's famous line about fox hunts?
No.
He described them as the inedible being chased by the unspeakable. Isn't that great?
That is brilliant. That's one of the funniest things I've heard.
That's great.
The inedible. Nobody eats a fox.
That's right.
Being chased by the unspeakable. I wonder if he ever did some hunting himself. He's British aristocracy, right?
It is, but he was so...
Yeah.
He was always off to the side, cheekily making fun of everything. Right.
Brilliant.
Right. All right, so they wind. Juno arranges for there's a thunderstorm, which separates the group, and now Dido and Aeneas are alone, and they find themselves seeking shelter in a cave.
Backing into this cave.
So you want to read some Latin?
I would love to. This is line 165. Speluncam Dido duxet Troianus andem, de veniunt primetellus et pronuba Juno, dancignum fosseir regneset conscius aether, conubi isc sumo cululardrunt vertica nymphae, illa dies primus leti primusquam alordrum, causa fuit nequinim specie famava movetur, neciam furtivum Dido meditatur amordrem, conjugium vocat, hoc praetexit nomine cupam.
Nicely done.
Thank you. It's great stuff in here.
Great stuff. Do you want me to do Lombardo's translation before we talk a little bit about some of the particulars of the Latin?
Yes, I think that'd be good.
Okay. So Lombardo translates this as such. And Dido and the Trojan leader make their way to the same cave. Earth herself and bridal Juno give the signal. Fires flash in the sky, witness to their nuptials, and the nymphs wail high on the mountaintop. That day was the first cause of calamity and of death to come. For no longer is Dido swayed by appearances or her good name. No more does she contemplate a secret love. She calls it marriage, and with that word she cloaks her sin.
That is an excellent translation.
That's beautiful.
It's really nicely done, Stan.
Yeah. So you want to talk a little bit about the Latin here?
Yes. So line 165, speluncam Dido duxet Troianus andem. This line has speluncam at the beginning, which our listeners can probably recognize as a word that means cave. Mm-hmm. The guy that goes down into the cave.
The spelunker.
Spelunker, right.
Yep.
So speluncam is cave. Now, at the opposite end of the line is the adjective eandem, which means same. So we've got the marker for cave at the beginning of the line, the marker for cave at the end of the line. See how it forms a cave? And what do we find right in the middle?
We find Dido and the Trojan.
That's right. Yeah. Dido duxet Troianus. The other really interesting thing about this is the placement of this word dux, right? So now dux means the leader or the commander, but it's a common noun, which means it could be either feminine or masculine, depending on to whom it refers.
Yeah.
But the way that Virgil has put together this gorgeous line is such that the word dux is right between Dido and the adjective for Aeneas, namely Troianus.
Yeah.
So we can't tell whether he is saying Dido, the leader, or whether he's saying Dido and the Trojan leader.
Right.
We can't tell which marker is a dux going with.
Do you think that he puts dux right after Dido?
That's right.
Do you think that's even kind of a subtle
absolutely
nudge to say that it's closer to it's more her?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah. He's deliberately making it ambiguous, and the name of this figure of speech is called apokoinu, which means in a common spot. So you can put an adjective or some other marker between two nouns.
Yeah.
And the reader cannot tell which is it modifying, which is it going with. And this is another element of Virgil's brilliance.
It is brilliant. Yeah. A couple questions here.
Yes.
I'm gonna kind of sit in the seat of a Latin student, because I can hear like one of my students asking this. Okay, so you have this brilliant line where you have this speluncam eandem, like literally putting the words between them in a cave.
Iconic word order, where the order of the words paints the picture you're supposed to get in your mind.
Exactly. Now, back in antiquity, we know that broadly speaking, very few people were literate.
Right.
And so probably the way that most people kind of digested the Aeneid was hearing it performed.
Yes.
So my question, I can hear one of my students saying this, that's brilliant, but would somebody hearing that and then another line immediately following, would they have gotten that?
Well, I think so.
You think so?
Yes, and here's my explanation.
Okay.
You're right. 10% maybe at max were literate. Only the highest portion of the society, 10%, and mostly male. I mean, there were women who read, but it was a small fragment. But great art, you don't have to get it all at once. There's so much in this line to enjoy. The basic meaning, Dido and the Trojan leader were in the same cave. Right?
Yeah.
They rendezvoused, how do you say it, bivouacked?
Did they bivouac in the same cave?
That's Deweniunt.
Yeah.
In the same cave.
Yeah.
So the meaning there, this is interesting. Romance is going to ensue. You don't have to notice spelunkam eandem bracketing the line to appreciate it. But if you do, then there's another level. You also don't have to get the third thing, which is that dux could go with either Dido or Troianus. But if you do, there's another element of pleasure, aesthetic interest. But then there's also just the simple alliteration, Dido dux. That's going to get your attention.
Right.
So I would say we should think about this in the same way that we might listen to a song. We might we might watch a movie or read a book. There's one song I really like. It's an instrumental guitar piece. It's called Can't Find the Words. And I've listened to that song maybe 500 times because I just love the melody. I just last week noticed some additional musical elements, like a little bit of percussion placed over here, on one side.
Yeah.
There's a spot where at the climax of the melody line, there's a bell, ting, that's hit just at the right time.
Yes.
You don't have to appreciate all of something at once in order to still find it, aesthetically riveting and explosive.
Okay.
You must have the same kind of
absolutely.
thing.
No, it's exactly. And it also reminds us why we hearing this story again and again and again.
Right.
This is a story worth retelling. This is a song worth re-listening to.
That's right.
So, like
it's packed.
With music, if you put on a decent pair of headphones,
right,
and you close your eyes,
right,
you're gonna notice all kinds of new things.
That's correct.
And that's part of the beauty of it.
Little accidental notes, slight little bends that you hadn't heard before.
Right. This also reminds me, we're both fans of The Simpsons.
Right.
There was one show with Professor Frink.
Yes.
He was handling some kind of toy.
Right.
And all the kids were reaching for it. They wanted it. And he says, you'll get it when you appreciate it on all the levels I do.
So Rubik's Cube or something.
Right.
So to answer the specific question, not every audience member would have caught all the elements of sophisticated storytelling in this line.
Yeah.
But they don't have to all catch it in order for it to be successful.
Gotcha.
And, the most educated, well, maybe that's not the right word, the most perceptive individual is going to be blown away.
Right.
And the least perceptive individual is still going to enjoy it.
Right. And the people who get it on the higher level then can kind of, look down upon the people who
exactly.
don't. Right?
Or explain it to them.
There you go. That's much more charitable.
And that's what great art is, right? It hits on multiple levels.
Right. Exactly. All right. So let's, you want to talk a little bit about Dido's guilt?
Well, there's one other item here in this quote that I think we really need to pay attention to.
Oh, in the Latin, you want to look at it?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's line 169.
Yeah, please.
Illa dies primus leti primusque malordrum, which Lombardo takes as that day was the first cause of calamity and of death.
Yeah.
I think this would have struck the audience, as it strikes me, as very powerful. What is one of the happiest days in a person's life?
It's your wedding day,
Your
right?
wedding day,
yeah.
Right. The bride has never looked more lovely. The groom has never been, more anxious, filled with excitement and uncertainty. And
Yes.
where am I supposed to stand? What am I supposed to do?
Exactly.
It's a magical day in some ways, right? And so the contrast between that and this line, that day was the first cause of death and destruction. That's shocking.
Yeah. I would also point out that while in these first 3-4 books that we've read, there's lots of talk about the future. There's a lot of talk about what's going to happen. There's lots of talk about what has to happen in Italy as fate demands. But this is, I think, a rare moment where we have Virgil, kind of the omniscient narrator, kind of break in. And there's not a prophecy that says, and Dido's fate will be sealed.
Right.
It's Virgil himself kind of coming and saying, and this was kind of
That's it.
This is the thing that kind of led to this calamity. And I think that too would probably set the audience kind of back on their heels, because unless I'm remembering incorrectly, Virgil doesn't do a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
He leaves kind of the predicative stuff to an oracle, to a prophet, to a prophetess, or something like that.
Right.
So even kind of the quality of the language here and the narrative is odd.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
and it reminds me of the fact that perhaps maybe if a person has had a very unhappy marriage, which must be some of our listeners, I don't know, hopefully not, but they might appreciate this a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
Because the contrast between everyone's looking their best, everything's excitement and balloons and happiness, but there's some hidden sorrow that's yet to emerge from this disastrous relationship.
Right.
And that's got to be shocking.
Sure. I think everybody looks back on. I mean, not even failed marriages, but relationships that don't work out. You're always looking back like was it that moment?
Exactly.
Right. Or I should have done X, Y, or Z. Right.
It's just nature of regret,
Of
kind
course.
of. So I've taken jobs that didn't go the way I intended, and you think back on them. If you're a reflective person, you try to figure out. So which was the step?
Yes.
That turned out to be really fateful, but I didn't realize it at the time, where it was leading.
Yeah.
That's always a surprising revelation.
Yes, indeed. So, and then the lines go on that Virgil tells us that Dido basically, all of her hesitation, all of her worries about her reputation, they're gone. She's all in.
That's right. No more does she contemplate his secret love. She calls it marriage. That's very interesting. Aeneas doesn't. She calls it marriage, and with that word, she cloaks her sin. The word is kulpam, her guilt. She covers over her guilt. This is the guilt of the broken promise to her dead husband, Achates.
Right.
She covers it up with this name, marriage.
Right. So I think with that line, Virgil kind of, he in terms of judgment, he's kind of saying, no, this is not a marriage. This is just this is a sham.
It is.
Dido's just simply using this as an excuse for kind of going against her vows.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jeff, I think we should bring in here the quote from William Anderson, The Art of the Aeneid, 1969, Prentice Hall. Could you read this? This is page 50.
Yes. So Anderson writes, there is an old controversy about Dido's guilt in all this, especially in the 19th century when marriage was often talked about, if not entirely treated, as something sacred. Commentators rather glibly explain Dido's tragedy in terms of her perjured oath toward her first husband, Achates. We now recognize that such a view is neither realistic nor even consistent with ancient practices. Although dramatic characters frequently assert, as their mates are dying, that they will never marry, and Virgil knew the motif. Remarry. Right. It reminds me of Alcestis, right?
Yes.
And Virgil knew the motif well. Remarriage obviously did happen both in myth and normal Greek and Roman life. To remarry is both natural and politically astute, as Anna, Dido's sister, correctly argues. So Aeneas will remarry when he arrives in Italy, patently without the slightest stain on his reputation. The crucial fact is not that Dido broke her faith to Achates, but that she entered into a pseudo-marriage which destroyed her honor. Despite all the apparent paraphernalia of Roman marriage ritual assembled by deluded Juno, the whole cave episode amounts to a mere travesty, a parody in which Dido gives herself unreservedly without asking for the protection of conventional marriage arrangements, and Aeneid gives himself with unspoken reservations. Dido certainly wins our sympathy for her commitment. At the same time, we must recognize why Virgil labels this passion with destructive metaphors, because its irrational features lead Dido to disregard her total range of responsibilities as well as those of Aeneas, and so to bring upon herself the consequences of an unreal marriage, quote unquote. That in the highest sense is tragic guilt.
Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So what do you make of that?
That's really interesting because when I read this now, one of my first instinct is to, in thinking about Dido's guilt, is, oh, she broke her vow to Achates.
Right.
And so I love how Anderson redirects that and says, no.
That's not really the issue.
That's not really the issue, particularly from an ancient perspective. And I like that too, kind of contextualize it in terms of how kind of a 19th century audience would.
Right.
And I would even argue, even to many readers today, 20th and 21st century, would also kind of read this through the lens of kind of the sanctity of marriage.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. There's a lot of emotional weight that's freighted onto a marriage.
Yes.
I would say irrespective of one's religious commitments, cultural commitments, marriage is pretty important.
Yeah.
It's given a lot of significance. So Anderson says, it's not that she broke her vow to Achates, it's that it's a sham marriage.
Yes.
And the two important points he identifies is Dido enters into it without any clear commitment on the part of Aeneas, no promises.
Mm-hmm.
And Aeneas enters into it with all kinds of unspoken reservations.
Right.
So how is this a real marriage?
Right, yeah.
And then I thought the contrast with when Aeneas arrives in Italy, he's ready to remarry Lavinia and no qualms whatsoever. And I think maybe one of the ways people misread this is to say, well, that's because he's a man and she's a woman. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a superficial analysis because what I've learned about Roman marriage and the custom of Roman law is that some of the obligations were equally shared. It's not just that the man had more freedom and the woman was kind of bound. It's a little more equitable than you might think.
Right. Yeah, certainly in terms of like a noblewoman, in terms of like what a domina was expected to do, running a household was like running a small army.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of contractual obligations that went into a marriage. It wasn't just man picks the woman, purchases her from the father, and it's a done deal.
Exactly. Well, Dave, speaking of sham marriages, it's time for the ads.
All right. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you, good folks, by the people at Ratio Coffee of Portland, Oregon. Jeff, what do you think about your Ratio 8? You graduated recently.
I did. Well, let me tell you, this morning, as I was off on my walk, getting my 12,000 steps in.
Bragging again, exactly. Are we?
Right, and as I kind of entered into that last mile,
yes,
it's just walking, but up and down a lot of hills. You're ready for it to be done.
Okay.
And the thought that kind of kept me going for that last stretch was I had my filter and my grounds ready to go in my Ratio 8, and all I had to do come inside, hit the button.
So you dragged yourself through the front door, yes, crawling on your hands and knees.
Exactly right.
Your feet bloody stumps of 12,000 stumpery.
Yes.
And you reached up to the counter,
hand trembling.
Yes, and you had to go through many steps to have delicious, perfect coffee, right?
Well, no, that's where you're wrong.
Okay.
In terms of getting things going, it was one step. I pushed a button.
Right. And did you just push it with your nose because you couldn't, lift your arm?
It was my trembling index finger got the job done.
And then what? It was like a 30 to 45 minute process before delicious coffee was delivered into the hand-blown borosilicate glass carafe?
Well, you're right about the carafe part.
Okay.
But it was very simple. It goes through basically 3 stages. You got your bloom, in which all the nasty CO2 is off-gassed.
There we go.
I don't even want to know where it goes. I don't care. It's gone.
Okay, and then what happened?
Well, then it goes through the second phase, which is the brew, which is arguably the most important because that's where the boiling hot water comes down through the grounds and into the hand-blown carafe.
And what were you doing during this stage? Rubbing your sore feet?
I had gone fetal on the couch.
Okay.
Yeah, and mentally preparing myself for return to the kitchen.
Okay.
But before you know it, it enters that third stage. It's ready.
The ready stage.
Yeah.
Then you take it off, mm-hmm, but it's already. Can you decant it into a kind of a heavy container that will keep it nice and warm?
You can if you want to,
because you still have the carafe from the Ratio 6, right?
Exactly. So if my dear wife is still sleeping, I want coffee now, but I want to let her sleep for a while. I will use that carafe from the 6 to keep it warm for hours.
Yeah, you don't want to give her the tepid, lukewarm after coffees.
No, it's a terrible way to
start the day.
That's cruel. Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, all kinds of options here. So I loved my 6. I love the look of the 8. It's beautiful. It's a work of art. You have the 8.
I do. Yeah. Yes, I'm really enjoying it. I had several cups this morning. I didn't think I had that far. I had that early morning tutoring obligation, so I had to grind the beans at the last minute, but that kept it fresh.
Yeah.
I pushed the button and went to take care of my other items. I came back. You don't have to watch this. You don't have to look over it. You don't have to drive to Bar Stucks or one of those places and wait in the line, drive through to get inferior coffee. Ratio does it all.
It does it all. And it's a great machine. These things are works of art. So listeners, check out these things at ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com. We got a couple of coupon codes to advertise. So for July.
Yes, only a couple days left.
Right.
You're going to want to enter in
ANCO A4.
A4.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And if you're listening to this in August,
it's ANCO 7C.
7C.
7 Charlie.
Yes.
Right?
And that will get them what?
It'll get them 15% off either the 6 or the 8.
Yes.
So ANCO A4 for July. That's a hit. And ANCO 7C for August. Yeah. You sank my coffee maker.
Very nice. Check it out. This episode of Ad Nauseam also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. In business now for pretty much exactly 50 years now.
Yes, they started in 1972.
72. They've got offices in Indianapolis and in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Right.
We love these guys. They've been with us from the very beginning of this
Incredible.
podcast. They took a dice roll on two schmucks like
A
us.
huge risk.
Yep.
That's right. So we dialed them up in I think it was the fall of 2020.
Yes.
As, what's that guy's name?
What? Who?
Not Barbara Walters, but what was the co-host? You know, the guy. What's his name?
I don't know who. I have no
On
idea.
2020, catch up here.
I never
Hugh
watched.
something.
What's that? Are you talking about Ted Koppel?
Hugh Downs. No, it was Hugh Downs.
Okay, Hugh Downs. All right.
It was the fall of 2020.
Gotcha.
And we dialed them up and said, look, we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And do you guys support the classics?
Yeah.
And they said, of course
we
do.
do. But who are you? Right. No, they were amazingly on board really quickly.
That's right.
They loved the idea of what we wanted to do. And here they are still with us.
Well, back then we were getting, 1-2 downloads per episode?
Right.
And they said, yeah, we'll take a risk.
Sure. Why not?
And boy, have they come through.
They have come through. And this is a great company. Check out their vast offerings. They do support the classics, but they have their fingers in all kinds of different areas of academia.
Latin American studies, East Asian studies.
Religious studies.
Yes, Norse studies.
They another thing we love about them is they will have the same text by different translators.
That's right.
So even options within kind of one work of literature.
Yep. So for the Aeneid, we've got Lombardo. We're going to read from Len Krizak, his rhyming translation of the Aeneid pretty soon.
Yep.
For Ovid, we had Lombardo and Ambrose.
Yeah.
So it's great stuff.
It's great stuff. So go to hackettpublishing.com. That's HACKETT publishing.com. Find your favorite text, drop them in the box, and type in the coupon code AN2022, and that gets you two great things: 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
Yes, it's incredible. Just yesterday, I had someone sign up for my LLPSI course, the Lingua Latina Per Se Illustrata.
Yeah.
The book's published by Hans Orberg. And I said, look, you can get it from that river-based emporium. What is it? It says Mississippi.com.
Yeah, exactly.
Hudson.com.
Nile.com.
I can't really place it. Flatriver.com.
Yeah.
But I said, you can do it there. But if you go to Hackett, you can get the hardcover of this gorgeous book, 20% off. And she jumped on it because why would you pass it up?
Why would you not do this? Right. So, listen, don't hesitate. Coupon code AN2022.
Check it out. All right, Jeff, so as we get back into this, we're going to take a little bit of a detour,
Yes.
Which is nevertheless germane to the topic.
Yep.
And that's going to be the subject of Roman law.
Right. So you found this. Did you have a copy of the Yale Law Journal just on your shelves in the house?
Yeah, I keep it next to, my collection of Spider-Man comic books.
Yes. But this comes from an article from back in the day.
Yes,
Seriously,
1907.
1907. But some information on marriage contracts in Roman law, which I think is a great supplement to what we just heard from William Anderson.
That's right. So the title is Marriage in Roman Law. I love those descriptive, robust titles.
Yes.
You know exactly what you're getting. Marriage in Roman Law. The authors are Andrew Birkin, Charles Sherman, and Emil Stockart. So this came out, as you said, in the Yale Law Journal, March 1907.
Wow.
And it's available in the public domain.
Okay. And so what caught your attention about this article in terms of how does this relate to the what we're talking about in the Aeneid?
Well, I thought it was an excellent description of some of the accessory elements that go into making a Roman marriage. Oftentimes, if you're reading the Aeneid, as I was reading it for the first time, many years ago, I had no knowledge of the context in which this is placed. So obviously, Roman people got married. There was an exchange of goods and names and so forth. But beyond that, I had no real clear thinking about what it was.
Right.
So as I've learned more, this has kind of crystallized. So the article starts out like this. Monogamy was, among the Romans, a traditional custom ordained by the positive law. In Roman law, marriage is a status created by a simple private agreement. So this is reminiscent of what happens in the cave. Right? It's a status created by a simple private agreement. Okay, so far, so good. Its validity results from this understanding and is absolutely independent of the betrothal, which ordinarily precedes of physical cohabitation, the festivities, the religious ceremony by which it may be accompanied. It is finally independent of any settlement which confirms the pecuniary terms, the money relations, of the union and serves as its evidence.
Okay.
So to summarize thus far, Marriage is a private agreement. It comes before all of the accessory things that are attached to it.
Right.
Money and contracts and so forth.
Yes.
But here's where it gets more interesting. The authors say, however, according to the opinion of many authors, Roman marriage, even of the last period, was never formed simply by the mere exchange of consents. So in the cave, we have consent of some sort.
Right.
Between the two individuals, Aeneas and Dido. Marriage presupposed a mode of living characterized by public acts of various kinds.
All right, so the authors are to relate this to the Aeneid, is they're saying that simply because of what happened in the cave, Aeneas and Dido consenting to each other, that does not make it a marriage.
That's right.
In any shape or form. That no Roman would have recognized it as such.
That's right. That's a necessary condition. That's the starting point. Will you marry me? Yes, I will. That's the necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. There's a lot more that goes into it.
Right.
And why this is interesting for Aeneas and Dido is because of all persons in Roman history and culture, they are the least private of all individuals.
Yeah.
They're not like you or I getting married. They are representatives of their respective nations.
Right.
So what they really did in the cave was highly irresponsible from a social perspective.
Right. And in many ways, a kind of an insult to their peoples.
That's right.
Right. So as leaders, they have an obligation to be as public about something like this as possible, and that's exactly the opposite of what they did.
That's right.
Yeah.
So to go on the second page of this article, on the other side, the authors say, according to the French jurist Ortolan, Roman marriage ranks amongst the real contracts. It has no existence if not accompanied by a traditio. Now, the traditio is the tradition or the custom of handing over and exchanging certain kinds of things that are accessory to the marriage, as I've been saying. Then arose in Roman law, as in all similar systems, the difficulty how to distinguish marriage from an irregular union in its two forms of concubinatus and mere concubinage. In other words, people living together doesn't constitute a marriage, but they have to have some kind of formality to it. So at best, what Aeneas and Dido were doing, here I'm interpreting, Aeneas and Dido were doing is they're entering into an informal kind of love match.
Yes.
It's not really a marriage, despite, as Anderson told us, all of the Juno stuff and the torches and the trumpets.
Right, exactly. All the light show and the flummery does not make a marriage.
That's right. Attaching the balloons to the car and putting streamers around and putting shaving cream on the windshield and all the other stuff that happens.
So we all recognize that as kind of wedding or marriage adjacent.
It's a wedding-esque.
It's wedding-esque, but it's not a marriage.
That's right. So the last little quote here. The answer to this, this difficulty, how to distinguish a true from a false marriage, was that marriage implied the intention of the husband to have a legal wife, to raise her to his rank, to make her his equal, and the corresponding intent of the wife. This was called the affectio maritalis. So is explained the famous Roman definition of marriage, which shows how much the Roman wife shares the religious and civil status of her husband. So it's an individua vitae consuetudo, that is an indivisible custom of living. It's a consortium omnis vitae, a joining together of one's whole life. It's a divini atque humani juris communicatio. It's a sharing of divine and human right or rank.
Interesting.
So here's where Aeneas and Dido really break down. They can't do these kinds of things, in part because they represent different cultures.
Right.
You can't join them together. He's got a predetermined fate, and now he's trying to marry this woman who's headed in a completely different direction.
Exactly.
It's a sham.
It's a sham, and it cannot ever work.
Right.
Yeah. So the problem here, or what compounds the problem, is that fama or rumor gets involved.
Yes.
And that it quickly, whatever kind of story that Aeneas and Dido wanted to kind of control is quickly out of their control, and suddenly the word is spreading like fire. It reminds me of another famous quote, I think is attributed to Mark Twain, is that rumor can make its way around the world before truth gets its pants on. Something like that.
That's a good one.
Right. And so this is becoming this is a fire that they cannot put out.
Exactly. It's blown way out of proportion.
Right. Do you want to read some Latin here?
Yes, I would like to. This is line 173. Okay. Extemplo libiae magnasit fama per urbes. There's that word fama. Fama malum qua non aliud velocius ulum. mobilitate viget viris quod quirit eundo, parvum tu primo moxe sat tollit in aurdras, ingreditur quesolet caput inter nubila condit.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
And so let me read Cresak's translation.
Yes, let's hear that, please.
I'll translate the Latin. Dave just read it a little bit more as well. Rumor tears through Libya's biggest towns, dread rumor, than which there's no evil faster. Speed, quick feeding on it, though unsure at first, adds fuel as rumor races so, that just a hint of gossip wafts her as she flies. She stands in dirt, her head hid in the murky skies. The gods provoked our Mother Earth to rage, some say, such that she bore this last for Coeus and to play the role of the sister to Enceladus, huge beast, wing swift and fast afoot, her countless eyes at least, as numerous as her plumes, and wondrous to relate, as many tongues and mouths and ears that prick up straight. She flies by night through gloom between the earth and sky, screeching, she never sleeps or shuts one searchlight eye. When morning comes, she sits her watch on roofs or high upon the city's towers, her looks can terrify. Sometimes she clings to lies, sometimes she tells what's true.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
And nice job, Mr. Kresak. Nice translation.
That's another one. Again, always very skeptical about kind of rhyming translations of dactylic hexameter or whatever the meter.
It's hard to do well. There's no doubt.
It's hard to do well, but that's fun to read.
Yes, if you get it right, it's brilliant.
It's fun to read. Kind of reminds me, some of the imagery he uses there is like the Eye of Sauron.
Oh, yeah.
Always kind of seeing like the searchlight, as Peter Jackson imagined it, kind of like this laser beam coming out. And
I thought that was good.
Searching around the world. Yeah.
A good representation by Jackson. Yeah. And of course, Tolkien influenced by the epic tradition.
Without a doubt.
Definitely, though writing in prose for the most part. So where does rumor go then as she flies along with all those mouths and tongues under her wings?
Right. Virgil tells us that it lands upon a certain Iarbas.
Yes.
And we also learned some interesting information here is that Dido has been pursued.
Yes.
By many of these local kings, right? They see, they kind of recognize a good thing when they see it, and they say this might be a good wagon to hitch to.
Right.
But we learned, of course, that she's turned them all down.
Yeah, so last time we referred to her as a reverse Penelope.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was thinking about that and wondering, is that apt? And I decided after a week of contemplation, it is.
It is apt.
It is apt. Here's how. Penelope ought to have gotten married by all rights, but she didn't want to. She refused to.
Mm-hmm.
Dido should not get married by all rights, but she wants to.
She wants to.
That's where it's the opposite.
Yeah, excellent. Good. So our instincts on that were correct.
Of course.
Yeah, so thank you for explaining it and landing it on solid footing.
So who is Iarbas?
He's a local ruler. He's a Libyan, I think.
African chieftain.
Yes.
That's right.
And he's one of these guys whose advances Dido has spurned.
He's a son of Jupiter.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, he's a king in his own right. He's no mean catch. He's the real deal.
Right, exactly. So he's thinking... this schmo,
right?
He's like, she's going off with this guy,
washed up on the shore. You're using a lot of Yiddish this week.
Am I?
Schmuck, schmo.
I am.
What's next?
I have no idea.
It's getting a little kitschy in here.
I think I've exhausted my Yiddish. Actually,
maybe you have.
Yeah.
Don't get verklempt.
There you go. So he's not happy. And so he goes straight to Dad, right?
That's right.
To Jupiter, and says, why does this guy get to win the prize?
Yeah, haven't we done all the correct rituals?
Right.
What's the breakdown here in religion is atrocious.
Right. In the framework of the books that we've read and talked about so far, being religiously correct is paramount.
It gets you,
right? You
what you want.
You do all the sacrifices. You please all the gods. And Iarbas, in many ways, from what we've read in the Aeneid, he's got a good case.
That's right.
Like, I've done everything right.
Yes, he refers to Aeneas as a, quote, Paris with his crew of eunuchs. That's some, what do we call this? Is that trash talk?
That is serious trash talk.
That is.
That's a great insult, though.
Yes, because Paris with your crew of your eunuch posse,
right,
traipsing around Carthage. Who is this guy, right?
It compares him to the guy who came to the wedding in Sparta and ran off with Helen.
That's right. So here is the big temptation for Aeneas. Is he going to behave like Paris, who is his cousin, his first cousin as the son of Priam?
Right.
But, not a good model for a hero in any sense. And that's where Aeneas is breaking down.
Right. And so Jupiter, again, kind of late to the game, right? Just kind of blinking his eyes. Wait, what's happening?
Sleepy uncle.
What's going on? And he says, okay, okay, take care of it. He goes, Mercury, get over here.
Right.
I got a message to send. Will you please just straighten this stupid stuff out?
Yes. Tell Aeneas this is his fate. He does not belong here. It's time to move on to Italy. Get going already.
All right. And should remind the audience, as we've covered, how many times has this fate of you are going to Italy been spoken. And in book 3, it's like 4 or 5 times.
Yes, and it's in book 1, in the promise that Jupiter makes to Venus when she complains, the Oli Sobridanes line.
Yeah.
It's been repeated many, many times.
And Aeneas has heard it in the narrative many, many times himself.
So the only reason, if we take Anderson's interpretation, we take Brooks Otis' interpretation, the only reason Aeneas could be so forgetful, devastated by the death of his father, he's run out of emotional strength. He's very vulnerable to the kind of security and comfort that Dido offers.
And I really like that interpretation.
I do too.
And I think this is one of the places where Virgil improves upon Homer. Right? I don't think we see, like in Odysseus, a lot of emotional development, so to speak. Right? He
steps onto the stage fully formed.
Fully formed, right? But I think in terms of a character whose emotions and life situations that a reader or listener could relate to, I think Virgil has it over Homer.
Yes.
Right?
So I could say, as I think about it, Odysseus throughout the epic becomes more of who he already was. He becomes more crafty, more clever, more skilled, a better liar. Whereas Aeneas goes through some actual changes.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's true, but they're subtle. They're subtle changes,
yes.
Right? At least early on. We'll see where this goes, but I think there's also kind of this sense that we've talked about. I think I've complained a little bit about the kind of the passivity of Aeneas,
right?
But in terms of like reader-listener response, he's kind of a blank slate that you can project yourself onto, right? In a way that I think you can't with an Achilles or an Odysseus,
right? So as we start to think about wrapping up here, we need to look at Mercury suiting up for his task.
Yeah, these are just great lines here.
They are.
Yeah.
And I think this is, again, part of Virgil's brilliance, is not everything in the story has to drive the story.
Yeah.
Some of it is just happy descriptions.
Yeah.
Poetic, what's the word I'm looking for? Virtuosity.
Yeah, for its own sake.
Yes, the beauty of the description. So I'd like to read just a couple lines of Latin, and then maybe you can give us the Lombardo translation.
I will.
Okay. Dixerat illa patris magni parere parabat imperiet primum peribus talardri enectit ardre quae subli malici quod supra selter dram rapido parater cum flamina portant.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
I like how that begins, just Dixerat, pluperfect there.
That's right.
He had spoken.
Dixerat, yes. Yeah. It's an echo of Homer's Greek in many spots where so he spoke. That was it.
Right. It kind of almost reminds me of like a thus saith the Lord.
There you go.
Exactly. It's the end of something and the beginning of something new. Lombardo translates this and beyond. Jupiter had spoken, and his son prepared to fulfill his commands. He bound on his feet the golden sandals whose wings carry him over landscape and seascape in a blur of wind. Then he took the wand he uses to summon pale ghosts from Orcus or send them down to Tartarus's gloom, the same wand he uses to charm mortals to sleep and make sleepers awake and unseal the dead's eyelids. Holding this wand, he now rides the wind, sailing through the thunderheads as he flies along. He makes out the summit and steep slopes of Atlas, who shoulders the sky. His pine-clad head is forever dark with clouds and beaten by storms. Snow mantles his shoulders, and icy streams drip from his frozen gray beard. Mercury glided to a halt here, poised in the air, and then gathered himself for a dive to the sea, where he skimmed the waves like a cormorant that patrols a broken shoreline hunting for fish.
That's really nice.
So brilliantly visual. The last part is so cinematic. Can't you just see him just kind of skimming along the water?
Yeah, like a cormorant trying to pick up a fish or a pelican.
It's so great.
And I love the way that the description of Atlas is snuck into the description of Mercury. Right?
Yeah.
It's embedded there so subtly and accurately.
Right. And I think it's also kind of very interesting. I don't know quite wholly what to make of it, is that he doesn't really dwell on Mercury's role as a messenger god, but rather he deliberates on his role as the psychopomp.
That's right.
So he is the one who can send people down to the shades, or bring them back. He has that control over kind of that knife edge of life and death.
That's right.
And I think that adds to the seriousness of the message he's about to deliver.
Yes, because Aeneas is on the knife's edge in terms of which way is he going to fall. All of that is introduced by just mentioning the fact that he holds the staff, the karakeas. Mm-hmm. He's got that. He's got the sandals. He's got the staff, and this is what the staff allows him to do.
So one of the things I always liked about Mercury / Hermes is that as an action figure, he had all these things like that would be sold separately.
Oh,
right?
exactly.
You got your basic Mercury, but you got to get the hat,
the accessories.
Would
he have a button in the middle of his back that when you push it, his arm would go up with the rod?
Exactly. He kind of waved the Caduceus around,
and maybe the wings on his feet would flutter.
Exactly right. Yeah, but you'd have to invest a lot of money to get all those pieces.
Probably.
Right? But
maybe when Ad Nauseam releases its action figure,
line,
right?
Yeah.
We've got Winkle with the massively developed quadriceps, 12,000 steps stalking around to his ratio 6.
I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Okay.
Right.
So where does Mercury find Aeneas when he finally gets down there?
Okay, so Aeneas, he's so deluded, right? So he finds him building Dido City. Remember that, once Dido kind of fallen for Aeneas, we learned that all the work that she had been doing stopped, kind of ground to a halt. She was, all in on this fling, and now Aeneas he's picked it up. He's building the towers.
How's he dressed?
He's dressed not like a Trojan. He's dressed in Tyrian purple.
Ooh.
He's dressing like Dido dressed him that morning. Here, wear this. You look great in this, honey.
Yeah.
But he's
a purple tie, really, Dido?
Right?
Oh yeah, trust me.
So now he's. I think so. Clothes is kind of an indication of identity. That's even like he's not a Trojan anymore. He's a Carthaginian. He's in with Dido. Again, the whole thing is kind of topsy turvy, right? So yeah, it's maddening. At least to me as a reader. Has he learned nothing? Is he so deluded by this, or as Otis would say, he's so emotionally needy from the loss of his father,
and weak and crushed,
that he can't be bothered to remember these things. He can't move forward because he's Dido is his crutch in the moment.
Incredible. So Mercury gets there and he minces no words.
He does not.
I like this expression, to mince words.
Yeah.
Is that Shakespearean in origin?
It wouldn't surprise me.
I wouldn't be surprised either. Some one of our listeners out there will look this up for us and let us know. And we will be filled with overwhelming but very temporary gratitude.
Exactly right.
I'm sure.
Right, yeah.
To mince words, you can mince onions.
Yeah.
I guess it's to take the knife's edge that we've been talking about and chop it up very finely. Mercury doesn't do that. He what's the opposite of mincing words?
He just flings the whole salad at him.
Yes, there you go. He rough cuts his words. He throws the whole salad in his face.
He does, right? And it's quite blunt here.
Yep.
Shall I read Lombardo's translation?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hey jerk face kind of, right? Continuinquadet tu nunc Carthaginus altai. What does Lombardo say?
Well, I love that Mercury doesn't come down. He doesn't introduce himself.
Right.
He doesn't say, "Oh, Aeneas, Prince of the Trojans." He just
God is born.
Exactly. It's like, hey, you.
Right.
He says, "Are you of all people laying the foundations of lofty Carthage and building a beautiful city for a woman?"
Yes. Let's pause there a second.
Yeah.
So, for a woman, this is Lombardo's translation of the adjective uxorius.
Yeah.
Which means, of or relating to a wife. Yeah. Uxorius. This is a brilliant translation because for a woman, is a prepositional phrase connoting purpose. And the mark of a good translator, in my estimation, is that you don't slavishly follow the part of speech from one language to the next.
Yeah.
He didn't say, try to describe Aeneas as, wifely or something like that. He really captures the meaning. You're doing this uxorius for a woman.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Right. And notice that uxorius is between Pulchrum and Urbum as well.
That's brilliant as well.
By the beautiful city.
In the middle of the beautiful city, we have a man doing the will of his wife exclusively, which is not a bad thing in itself. Maybe even in Roman culture, it's a bad thing when you are the leader of a civilization.
Yes, exactly.
And the woman to whom you're, quote, married is the leader of another civilization.
Right, exactly. So if Aeneas had been doing this for his proper wife,
correct,
and properly recognized by public ritual, this would not be a problem.
Exactly. Right. Well said.
Yep. Lombardo's translation goes on. Mercury says, "What about your own realm? Your own affairs? The ruler of the gods and of all the universe has sent me down to you from bright Olympus, bearing his message through rushing winds. What are you thinking of, wasting your time in Libya? If your own glory means nothing to you, think of the inheritance you owe to Ascanius, a kingdom in Italy in the soil of Rome."
Yes.
So once again, it's the same prophecy.
Correct.
But he's kind of, it's like, it reminds me of, he's like Mo with Curly, kind of, slapping him.
That's
like,
right.
What's wrong with you?
Exactly.
You knucklehead.
Wake up.
Wake up.
Right. Did you hear that Tony Dow died?
Oh, Wally Cleaver.
Yes, but guess what?
What?
He didn't die.
it was a false report?
Yes.
What in the world?
Yes. Okay. When you mentioned the Three Stooges, I thought of television from that era.
Is that legit?
And my mind immediately went to Tony Dow from Leave It to Beaver, right? And so an announcement came out yesterday, and I loved that show as a kid. It's a funny show. There's some subtle humor in there.
Yeah.
I know that people tear it apart for various social reasons, but there's also some subtle humor in there.
Sure, certainly. Yeah.
And so they released a statement. One of his managers, our beloved Tony Dow, has died. And in the evening, they said, false alarm, he's not dead.
Is he on his deathbed?
Yes,
he is. Okay.
He's in hospice care in the last stages of life. So it was just a mistake that was quickly retracted.
Yeah.
But I felt, really bad for the family. That's got to be rough.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. So now, the key is, can I connect this to?
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I don't know if I can. Let's see. Eddie Haskell.
Yes.
Right. Aeneas is behaving like Eddie Haskell. The irresponsible, wisecracking neighbor.
Right.
Is that going to work?
It's a stretch. But I'll buy it.
Should we ask Mishka to cut this out, or should we just leave it in? As one of my failures?
Let's leave it in. Right.
Okay.
Right.
So Ascanius.
Right.
Yes. Mercury doesn't mention Anchises. He's dead, but he says, hey, you have other pietas. You have pietas to your son. And if you don't care about founding Rome, fine. But what about your boy? He's got to inherit your work. So snap out of it. Shape up.
Snap out of it. Right. And so Aeneas does kind of, but again, he doesn't. Here he's kind of a little bit pulled from his stupor, but he doesn't go to Dido and say, "Hey, listen, Mercury, the gods have told me this. In fact, they've told me this many times, and this is why I can't stay."
No, not immediately.
Not immediately. No.
And when he does confront her, it's very lackluster.
It's cold.
Namby-pamby.
Yep.
He does take some action, though.
He does.
And so this gets us on to about line 280, right? Maybe we should wrap it up with this. What do you think?
Let's do that, yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you read just the first line of the Latin there, and then I'll give you Lombardo's translation.
All right. At ver Aeneas aspectab mutuit amens.
Amens.
Yeah.
All right.
Out of his mind. Insane.
Yeah. Aeneas stood there amazed, choking with fear. I'm guessing that Lombardo is amazed?
Yes, it's not bad.
It's a little weak, isn't it, though?
Well, the word itself is strong, but it isn't maybe entirely accurate. Amens means, shocked out of recognition. So maybe amazed is okay.
Right.
Not his best moment, right? But I mean, he has so many of them that
I think we've diluted the word amazed in a way and like awesome too.
You're right.
Right. I think those words
that donut was amazing
in their core.
Right.
Their core usage is much bigger than we tended.
Was the donut really amazing?
Was it awesome?
You expected a donut, right? There's not a lot of variety, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Maybe some maple bacon drizzle would make it amazing. I don't know.
But Aeneas stood there amazed, choking with fear. He bristled all over, speechless, astounded. And he burned with desire to leave that sweet land, in awe of the commandment from the gods above. But what should he do? What can he say to the queen in her passion? How will he choose his opening words? His mind ranges all over, darting this way and that. As he weighs his options, this seems the best choice.
See, but it isn't.
It is.
The best choice that he's going to give us, this is not the best choice. This is the coward's way out.
This is a terrible idea.
So what does he do?
He calls his captains, Menesthius, Sergestus, and brave Serestus, and he orders them to prepare the fleet for silent running.
Silent running?
It's like, we're out of here.
Here's the keys. Crawl out to the parking lot, open the door, crawl in, keep it low, and then, put it in first gear and have the other guys just push it out of the parking lot out into the street. Maybe Dido, who's sitting in the booth by the window, with a cup of coffee, maybe she won't notice.
She won't notice, right, exactly.
This is terrible.
Terrible idea. I'm going to put the motor for kind of no wake, right?
Right.
Just kind of troll out of the harbor. She said, prepare the fleet for silent running, get the men to the shore and get the gear in order, but conceal the reason for this change of plans.
We just, we had to just go out. We wanted to catch some fish. Exactly. We're not going to sail away to Italy. We're just going to troll in the harbor a little bit. Just a little bit. Get the wacky noodles and the arm swim rings. We're just going to take a dip.
Take a dip. Nothing to worry about. He says, meanwhile, he explains that since good Dido knows nothing and would never dream that a love so strong could ever be destroyed, he himself will find a way to approach her, the proper occasion to break the news to her gently.
Break the news to her gently.
Get ready. Let's, let's leave.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is stupid.
And I'll think of something to say.
It's just not going to work.
No,
break the news to her gently. How can you break the news to someone gently about something so terrible?
Right. Yeah, it's awful, and but we're gonna have to save the awfulness for the next episode.
Well, what about the captains, though? Just the very last bit of it. The captains. This would be the three guys that you mentioned: Menestheus, Sergestus, and brave Serestus.
Yeah.
Were more than happy to fulfill his commands. Do we get a little insight here into the psychology of Aeneas's followers?
Are they kind of like? Well, it kind of reminds me of. Odysseus' men on like Circe's Island. Like,
yes.
Why are we hanging around?
Yes, but I would say that the subordinate characters are better developed in Virgil than in Homer.
Oh, agreed. Because
Odysseus is really the only guy that matters. Maybe Elpenor a little bit.
Yeah.
But we're given a little psychology of the Roman supporting crew, right? This posse of eunuchs, as Iarbas called them.
That's so awesome. There, I use that word again.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
They want to get out of Carthage.
Yeah.
More than happy to fulfill his commands.
Right.
Speaking of getting out of Carthage,
yes,
it's time to wrap up this episode.
Let's do this. Before we get out of here, you want to talk a little bit about the Moss method?
I do,
okay.
Yeah. We're going to be running a sale. I've threatened this many times.
Yes.
I'm going to say it now. It begins August 15. August 15.
Okay.
It's a Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Nifalor, this is your back-to-school sale.
Excellent.
And you can get 10% off Moss Method. So go to mossmethod.com, watch a lot of the free stuff we ask you humbly. And then if you like the way that I teach Greek, if you want to learn some of the things that I've learned in the last 30 years of being a student and teacher, sign up for the course.
Sounds great. So mossmethod.com.
That's right.
Take advantage of all the free stuff that you have there.
Yep.
And dive in 10% off.
That's right. So starting August 15th.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, for now, it's $325 per module. It's a massive amount of information. But what about the office hours, Jeff? You always ask me about those.
The office hours.
Love those.
I do, though. So you're not doing those anymore, right?
No, I am.
Oh, what are they? What's that all about?
There's no flanky.
Yeah,
no flunky. No.
Right. It's you.
It's I.
And so this is a way that the students can have direct contact with you.
Right. We read some Greek together every Friday at present. Friday morning, we've got some folks from California, Australia, New York. We have some folks from Ireland taking Latin classes, South Africa taking Latin. It's a worldwide phenomenon. Hong Kong, you name it.
Fantastic.
Vancouver. We get together and we try to have a little bit of a subtilicium, that is a companionship of literature, and read some Greek.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It is, for sure. Whom do we need to thank here?
As always, we have to thank Mishka Fernando, our great engineer who puts this all together. And I'm always amazed at how quickly and cleanly she gets
It's incredible.
It's amazing.
We're so grateful. Scott Van Zen.
Yep.
The combination of Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Just like those two guys, Scott has three names too. Did you notice that?
I did.
Scott Van Zen. The guy can rip on guitar.
He's amazing.
He plays the guitar like he's ringing a bell. It's really excellent. So thank you, Scott.
And also thanks to Ken Tamplin,
right?
Of the Phenomenal Vocal Academy,
right?
He also is responsible for some of the great music
and some excellent shirts. Have you seen the shirts he wears?
That guy can dress.
Yeah, that guy. He's on camera. He's dressing nicely.
Yes,
so thanks, guys, for contributing your music so generously.
Yep.
If you'd like to leave a comment or get a shout back, you want to complain about Jeff, you want to write to jeff@adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V.
Or if you want to complain to Dave, you can complain at dave@adnauseam.com. Also, again, don't forget the V.
That's right. Go to our website and you can check out the link that says Lurch with merch.
Mm-hmm.
And you could pick up a Quai Nocent Docent Ad Nauseam t-shirt.
Yes, very fashionable.
Yes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's right. Even Ken Tamplin, I think, would wear one of those.
Oh, yeah. Maybe I should ask him to.
Hey, and we'd also appreciate a review on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. That kind of raises our profile. Leave us a nice note. If you have something negative to say, maybe send that privately to our email addresses. Or you just say
no, put it out.
Put it out there. Okay,
we can take it. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger.
Exactly.
What about next week?
Next week, we're gonna finish up book 4.
Yes, this will be the Aeneid book 4, and I think this will be part 3. Right? This will be it. We'll wrap it up. The argument between Aeneas and Dido, some interpretation, and of course the final terrible tragic death of Dido herself.
And Dave, you have our gustatory parting shot.
Yes, I do. This comes from an author named Marissa Meyer and her work Heartless. I don't know anything about this except I like the quote. Some say it is better to have eaten and lost than never to have eaten at all.
Very nice.
I don't think this means to eat and have lost weight. I don't think that's what it means.
Okay.
Because that's not usually what happens to me when I eat.
No, it's quite the
So
opposite.
maybe some say it is better to have eaten and lost, what? Friends, family?
Yeah, there you go.
When you're tucking into a big plate of pork chops or something like that.
Yeah.
Friends and family are the last thing on your mind.
Right.
So if I killed the quote by overanalyzing
No. It's better to have eaten and lost that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, lost your friends than to have never eaten that pile of nachos in the first place.
Okay, so how about you give us the final gustatory parting shot and we'll stop there.
Some say it is better to have eaten and lost than never to have eaten at all.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.